Would the senator yield for a question?
I'm happy to yield for a question without yielding the floor.
You know, senators don't always ask for advice from other senators, but I thought I'd come down and make sure you had comfortable shoes on, make sure you're getting enough to eat. Try not to eat on television. That's a little bit of free advice that sometimes shows up. But my question really relates to Obamacare, and I think you've done a good job of bringing attention to something that I think is going to be a real tragedy for the country. As we get involved with this, there's so much talk about tactics and this and that, whether now's the right time, when's the right time to do this. But I think really the question is, do we need to talk about something that's going to affect 16% of our economy, a sixth of our economy? Do we need to bring up an issue? Do we need to draw attention and try to stop something that really can be damaging to the people it precisely is intended to help? Now, I think it's personally, not a good idea to shut down government. I think it's also, though, not a good idea to fund Obamacare. Can they both go together? Can you do one without the other? Some, like the president, have said, oh, Republicans, they just want 100% of what they want or they're going to shut down government. Well, can you say something so patently false and get away with it is my question. The president wants 100% of what he wants. He wants Obamacare as he passed it with only Democrats, and he wants it never to be changed. He wants no compromise. He wants what he wants, or he's willing to shut down the government. That's what this debate is about. Obamacare was passed with only Democrats. No Republican input, no Republican votes. And now when people are saying there are problems, his own people are saying there's problems. The Teamsters have said it's a problem. Authors of the bill are saying it's a train wreck. The former president came out this week and said it's going to hurt the people it was intended to help. So we've got all of these people saying, for goodness sakes, slow this train down, stop this train wreck of Obamacare. And all everybody cries about is, oh, somebody wants to shut down the government. The president doesn't want to compromise. What we're talking about is we don't want to spend money on something that's not going to work and hurt the people, precisely the people it was intended to help. But the thing is how do we fix it? What do we do? Can we scrap the whole thing? Well, the Democrats control one body. We control the other body. They control the presidency. Well, historically, what would happen, and I think what the American people would like to see is we stand up, as the senator from Texas is, and say what we're for. We're for a different solution. We're for competition. We're for the free market. We're for bringing health care to everyone with a lower price. We went through this whole debacle of giving people Obamacare, and it's going to be expensive. Everybody's going to pay more. Many people still won't have insurance, and the ones who do have insurance are going to pay more. So what would we like? Why are we here today? Why is the senator from Texas here today? To say to the president, we need to talk. But what does the president say? He says, my way or the highway. When the American people said they want dialogue between Republicans and Democrats, how do we get there? We have to stand up for what we believe in so they will come and talk. Does it mean we're going to get 100% of what we want? No. But if we don't stand up for what we believe in, how will we have any dialogue? How will we get to compromise? How do we get them to talk to us? We're not asking for 100% of what we want, but we're asking for a dialogue. How do we get the dialogue unless somebody's willing to stand up and say enough's enough? When we look at this, if we want to ever get to the point of getting to compromise, the only way we get there is by standing up and saying, we believe in this. It isn't about us demanding 100% of what we want, but right now, if you look at this objectively, the president's getting 100% of what he wants. Obamacare passed by only Democrats, not one Republican vote. So really, how do we get to what the American people want, which is dialogue and compromise? We have to look at a deadline. We have a deadline. And my question to the senator from Texas is, does he want to shut down the government? Is that his intention? Or is it the president's intention to shut down government? Or is it perhaps that when deadlines come forward, it's a good time for dialogue because no one ever seems to talk at any other time? So I would ask the senator from Texas, what are your intentions? Do you want to shut down government or would you like to find something to make Obamacare less bad? I know we'd both like to repeal it, but would you accept anything in between?
Well, I thank the senator from Kentucky for his very fine question, and let me say at the outset before I respond directly to the question that I remember not too many months ago standing on this same Senate floor in the midst of your historic filibuster. And I will say it was one of the proudest moments of my life. Indeed, during your filibuster on drones, that was the first time I'd ever spoken on the Senate floor. And I have observed multiple times that I will go to my grave in debt to Rand Paul. To have the opportunity for the first time, and there'll only be one first time that anyone gets to speak on this floor, to have that first time be in support of that tremendous filibuster that mobilized and unified the American people. And I will note, one of the things I remember you shared with me afterwards was the advice you just did a minute ago. I remember asking you, so what'd you think? And you were pretty weary at the end. And your comment at the time was, well, I wish I had worn more comfortable shoes. And I'll confess, I thought about that. That struck me as pretty good advice. And so I'm going to make an embarrassing admission here right now. I'm going to get to your question in a second, but I wanted to make an embarrassing admission first, which is, for many years, when I was in private practice, when I was Solicitor General, I wore a particular pair of boots, my argument boots. They're black ostrich boots. Litigators are kind of superstitious souls, and so anytime I went into court to argue a case, I wore my argument boots. I've had them resold, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. And when I had the great honor of serving in this body, being sworn in to the United States Senate, when I was sworn in, standing on those steps just in front of us, I wore my argument boots. And I've worn them every day since. I don't believe there's been a day on this Senate floor that I haven't worn my argument boots. So I had a choice with which I was confronted, which is, do I follow through and wear my argument boots, or do I listen to the very sage counsel from my friend from Kentucky and go with more comfortable shoes? And I will embarrassingly admit that I took the coward's way out. And so went and purchased some black tennis shoes. Actually, I think they're the same model that the senior senator from Utah, Orrin Hatch, wears on a regular basis. And so I am not in my argument boots, and I'll confess, I really do feel embarrassed by that. And so this is, I'm pretty sure, since we're on the Senate floor and C-SPAN's covering it, that this may not be protected by the priest penitent privilege, but I do feel this is a confession of sorts. The question that Senator Rand Paul asked is an excellent question. His question was, does anyone here want to shut down the government? And the answer is absolutely not. We should not shut down the government. We should fund every bit of the government, every aspect of the government, 100% of the government except for Obamacare. And you know what? That's what the House of Representatives did. The House of Representatives, 232 members of the House, including 2 Democrats, voted to fund every bit of the federal government, 100% of it, except for Obamacare. I would note last night on the floor of the Senate, I asked the majority leader to consent to passing the continuing resolution that the House passed, passing it into law. Had the majority leader not stood there and said, I object, the continuing resolution would be passed into law and the government would not be shutting down. The majority leader had every opportunity not to shut down the government. So let me be absolutely clear. We should not shut down the government, and I sincerely hope that Senator Reid and President Obama do not choose to force a government shutdown simply to force Obamacare on the American people. That would be a mistake. Instead, what we should do is listen to the American people, make D.C. listen.
Would you yield for one quick question?
I'm happy to yield for a question without yielding the floor.
Since we're making it clear that the Republican message and alternative here is not to shut down government, our desire is to have no Obamacare. We desire not to have it. We think he went the wrong direction. But we don't control all of the government. We don't control the Senate. It's controlled by the opposition party. We don't control the presidency. My question to you is, if you can't get everything you want, if you can't defund Obamacare, which is exactly what you and I both agree on, and millions of people across America want us to get rid of Obamacare, but if you can't, if you stand today and argue and cannot get rid of it, will you accept a compromise? Will you work with the president? Will you work with the majority leader if they're willing to come and say, you know what, we're right, we messed up on a bunch of this. There's a lot of people who are going to be hurt by Obamacare. So a lot of part-time workers are going to lose their jobs or going to lose hours. They're going to be real workers who are full-time who are going to lose their insurance or their jobs. Are you willing to work with us? Are you willing to work with with the leader, Senator Reid, with the president to find a compromise?
Well, I thank the senator from Kentucky for that question. I think it's a very good question. You know, this afternoon, you and I and all of the Republican members of the conference spent some 2 hours in a closed-door strategy session. And I'm not going to reveal what anyone else said there, but I certainly feel comfortable revealing what I said there, which is, if we are going to make real progress in solving the problem that is Obamacare, in listening to the American people, in mitigating the job losses, the people losing their health insurance, all of the harms that are coming from Obamacare, we've got to stand and fight right now. The battle before this body is the cloture vote that will occur on Friday or Saturday of this week. If all 46 Republicans vote together in unity to support the House Republicans and to deny Majority Leader Reid the ability to fund Obamacare on a straight party line vote, that puts us in a position to address the problem. Now, your question was, would I vote for something less than defunding Obamacare? Personally, no. Why? Because I've committed publicly over and over again to the American people that I will not vote for a continuing resolution that funds 1 penny of Obamacare. And, you know, I'm reminded of when I first arrived in the Senate. I spent 2 years campaigning. The senator from Kentucky, Senator Paul, campaigned with me in Texas over and over again. You want to talk about a rock star, you should see when Rand Paul shows up in Texas, the huge fans that would come out for Senator Paul and for his dad. And I spent 2 years campaigning in Texas saying the first bill I'll introduce in Congress will be a bill to repeal Obamacare. When I showed up, lots of reporters, I introduced a bill to repeal Obamacare. They immediately said, well, why'd you do that? And my response was, well, I spent 2 years campaigning telling the American people that'd be the first bill I'd introduce. And they were utterly befuddled why anyone would actually do what they'd say. So in answer to your question, will I vote for something that is a middle ground that funds Obamacare? Partially, no. Why? Because I've repeatedly told the American people, I've told Texans, I will not vote for a continuing resolution that funds Obamacare. But that being said, are there members of our conference who would like to see a compromise, who would like to see a middle ground that is perhaps not what I very much want and will fight for with every ounce of strength I have, but that mitigates some of the damage of Obamacare, that responds to the people who are suffering from Obamacare? I think there are quite a few senators who would like to see that happen. And if Republicans roll over on the cloture vote on Friday or Saturday, if we allow the majority leader to fund Obamacare with 51 votes, we will get no compromise. There will be no middle ground because there's no reason to compromise. It's much like in a poker game. I know the senator from Kentucky, many of his libertarian supporters enjoy a good game of poker. As a Texan, I will admit to not being entirely adverse to it myself. In a game of poker, if somebody makes a bet and then says to you, if you raise me, I'm going to fold, you will lose 100% of your poker games. That is a path to losing. For those members of the Republican caucus who are perhaps not as adamant that we should insist on complete and total defund now, I don't intend to waver from that position, but there may be others who disagree. If you want to get to any middle ground that is not a symbolic vote to tell our constituents, but that actually changes the law to make things better for the men and women at home, to mitigate the harms of Obamacare, the only way to do so is for Republicans to stand united and to deny the majority leader the ability to fund Obamacare on a 51-vote partisan vote.